An entrepreneurial journey, your networks is your net worth. Right.
There is something I would want to understand more, the viewer would like to understand.
Right.
Is from the story you have shared,
Yes.
we have different elements that were required to make this business work.
Yes.
For example, you have talked about the fabrication of the equipment.
Yes.
Which is a very important aspect of the business.
Yes.
And I think there could be some others that we might not have highlighted.
Absolutely.
So how did you bring up the people to be able to do this? Were you able to bring up to pay a team to do, or were you able to partner with people to be able to achieve this?
It's a multifaceted approach. During that time, the early 2000s, the late 90s, there was a lot of, I'd realized there was a trend where any old age, mature person who would retire would want to do something after his retirement. So we developed what you call a brand within the equipment fabrication market space. So we were known. So we knew, like anybody who wants to retire, we would advise them, like, why don't you take up an equipment that would, and a lot of people at that time would go and invest their retirement money in equipment fabrication, what you call posho mills. It was an easy investment. The women would go for machines like peanut butter machines. The women would go for like dryers, cookers, which are basic equipment. But until I started plastic recycling, when the idea of plastic recycling came in, then it focused a lot more on manufacturing other than equipment fabrication. Equipment fabrication was a foundation. I still do it to date. It's the holding company. That's why we can afford all these various factories, because we manufacture our own equipment. We don't go to buy from out. From China. That will be expensive. It will be tedious. The qualities will be compromised. These can be done here. We do them here. And that's why we can afford being in plastic, we can afford being in food processing, can afford being in water recycling, we can afford being in energy production, can afford being in various, but you see the fact that we had a good foundation, which was the equipment fabrication business. It's given birth to over 10 other entities because we had a very good foundation. And with a good foundation, once you have an injection of a grant, like the Tony's grant, then sky is the limit.
For sure.
Yes.
Tell us more about the plastic.
Interesting. Plastic, the whole idea behind plastic during those days was energy generation. Hence the name Continental, renewable energy company. The idea at that time, I think, was the year 2000, when there was a serious, what you call, power interruption program. The dams in Canberra, I think, the water levels had gone down. In Kariobangi, we would only work at night. There was no power at daytime. And Kariobangi isn't so far from the Dandora dam site. So, and there's a lot of mini dam sites in Kariobangi, by the way. So we'd see an opportunity, and what came into my mind when I earlier at that time visited Dandora, I had some consultancy work to do there. As a consultant at that time, my role was to establish how much garbage goes into the dam site. So I'll count the trucks whole day, and the dumping goes day and night. And the question after the assignment was, what happens after it's dumped? After you've dumped at the site, what next? You see a lot of scavengers, animals, and human beings scavenging. But what came in my mind is that as a scientist, I went ahead and tested some gas that was coming out, and I realized it was methane gas. And that triggered something that has changed my life to date, the way I used to think. 20 years down the lane, that thought hasn't stopped. It's not gone off my mind, because that thought was how to harvest that gas, harvest it into a biodigester, then have a biofuel generator hooked to the main line to supply power, which was in shortage at that time. It was a wonderful idea. It went and won an award too. But I couldn't implement it because the money that was required, the capital outlay, was enormous. We are talking of 10 billion during 2009. I couldn't afford that. But in my business plan that won the award, it had components like plastic recycling, charcoal production, what you call food processing for fertilizer. But they weren't significant. My head and my brain was focused on energy production. So apparently, one of the judges who read my document told me, advised me, why don't you start small? I think that the plastic could be easier than the bigger energy.
What competition was this?
That was Chora Business. Then we went on with the plastic. Now, the plastic initially was just to make fencing posts. You extrude. In fact, the first post I made, I didn't even have an extruder. I was looking for an extruder. And we looked around. It was a rare commodity around. We couldn't buy it, but I had an idea because I'd read and done some research on the designs of an extruder. So we went to Kirdi in South Sea, gave them the design. To date, that machine has not been delivered. We went to numerical engineering, the railways. That machine has not come to date. So I decided to assemble my team, and we had the idea. So we managed to put up an extruder. We had some parts of a barrel with the gearbox, and we assembled an extruder, which would do one post for 1 hour.
One post for
one post for 1 hour. Now, out of engineering and getting polished, we've moved it such that the machine we currently have does one post in 3 minutes. So we've grown from one post an hour to almost 10 posts an hour or more. It took resilience. It took innovation. It took teamwork, because I had a team on the ground that whatever idea that came in my mind, they'll exactly translate it the way I think. And that was key.
Have you come to a place where you hire your team, or have you come to a place where you have to look for, human capital by just giving some equity?
So I've got a lot of people I mentor. But through my mentor, a lot of people come to me, not just Kenyans. People, Nigerians are always here almost weekly. Ethiopians are almost here monthly. Somalians came, knocked the door, and now we have a factory in Somalia, a larger one than what we have here.
The factory in Somalia does what?
It does roofing tiles. And we've even moved from the traditional technology, which involved the extruder. Now we are using densification. And it's happening in Somalia. A new technology that would reduce the cost of power and end up getting the right material at a lower energy cost. So you see, that inspiration came with innovation. And the innovation that we have has now changed the landscape of doing business, especially plastic business. Plastic was traditionally, and it is still to date, predominantly recycled using extrusion. It's not the best because it's expensive in terms of power consumption. Densification, which is new and we've already patented, is the way to go. Because if you can reduce your cost of production by 40%, then you can tell how much profit you'll make.
And this innovation, Daktari,
right,
how does it come about? Does it come as a result of just necessity from the experience you have, or does it come from where is it drawn from?
My innovation, I'm a Christian, a very strong Christian. And I know that I might not have the same brains everybody has out there. A unique brain that can handle healthcare and a unique brain that can handle engineering. But why I give God the credit is the way, like how the tile came about. At that time, we were struggling to improve our extruder from the 1 fold to 10 folds or 15 folds to date. So in that process, there are a lot of things that we did in terms of designing the gearbox to increase the speed. Then sometime in 2001, I'd had a dream, a very strange dream. That's why I say God could be involved. I'm sure as a Christian, it wasn't just an ordinary dream. It was a dream where I dreamt that I was actually melting plastic. That I picked up soil, sand somewhere, added to that plastic. And here we have a resin, which has changed the world, not Kenya alone.
Talking about that change, how have you benefited directly and how has it changed in terms
This change has given birth to green pavers. We have a company that does that called Green Pavers. It's given birth to eco resin post because the material that goes into that product is a resin, a mixture of sand and plastic.
Mixture of sand and plastic?
Yes, that's the tile that we have.
And talking about it in terms of business, how are those businesses doing?
They're sustainable. They've reached, Corec has over 4,000 customers. Green Pavers is right on its back with over 3,000. The same resin is running with Eco Resin Post Ventures, which has also grown. So it's a resin that can be molded into anything. And the way it came, it was a dream. Now that dream, when I went and actually tested, I went and picked up a number of different soil structures, sand, volcanic sand, low river sand, red soil. We tried all that and we ended up with what we have today after, because I had a laboratory where I tried my dream. Today, it is the largest plastic recycling in East and Central Africa with the only unique material called a resin.
Which you patented?
Which I patented. It took me 10 years to patent.
Anybody wants to do that?
A lot of people want to do it. But they come, those are some of my mentees. We've gone into agreements. I think we got 2 people who are doing something close to it that are my mentees. And they seem to work, we seem to be having a good working relationship. And in Somalia, the Somalis have already invested through what you call African Solutions. It's running. It's bigger than even the ones we have in Kenya.
So how many posts or tiles are we talking about?
Every day, in 10 days, in 10 hours, The machines have, like the Nairobi one has 1,200 tiles, and they work day and night across the year. So you can tell, and there's a queue.
People
Yeah, people are queuing because there's always a queue. You don't go and get it over the counter. You come in, wait for a week or two because there's a queue. The whole idea is that it's come with good benefits. One, we are lifting plastic from the landfill because we recycle about 100 tons every month in one factory. So you know the quantity we're talking about. Now, we have employed indirectly, we have collectors who have to ensure that the factory runs. We've got 600 collectors across Mathare, Huruma, Dandora, Kariobangi, Umoja, Isli, Kibera. They bring their plastic. Because what we've done is that we have enclosed them into what you call CBOs, community-based organization, and self-help group organizations, depending on how they gel. Remember, they were chokoras. They are no longer chokoras today. These are micro-entrepreneurs. If you look at our raw material budget, then you can tell how much they earn. We've empowered some of them by giving them machines like crushers, where they crush and have a contract with us to supply. So that is what keeps us consistent in terms of material supply. So that is a positive impact. When they come in, we also link them up with NHIF to ensure that they and their families are health covered. Those that also show interest are those that work in the factory, who we mold from chokoras to become expert machine fabricators. Today, they are not chokoras. They've transformed from chokoras to micro-entrepreneurs and skilled artisans, great welders, machine operators. So it's a journey that has transformed the society. Looking at how I started, looking at what we do today, with interest in fertilizer, interest in plastic, interest in charcoal briquettes, interest in water recycling, interest in jewelry, interest in aluminium, interest in engineering. It's a wide thing that started from a very humble background in Kariobangi. So, lessons learned is that social entrepreneurship is the way to go, because it transforms the society from basically what they used to be to what is today. And social entrepreneurship is a policy that I'll encourage the government to adapt, because we don't have a legal act that addresses social entrepreneurship, because you are either a sole proprietor or a partnership or a limited liability, isn't it? But here we've come up with we've already developed a social entrepreneurs bill that is going to go to Parliament, so that it can accommodate the many likes that we have in the Tony Elumelu program to come and be within the act, be absorbed as social entrepreneurs recognized by an act of Parliament. It's not just a journey that started in Kariobangi, it's a journey that has created a lot of social mountains and social bridges to get us to where we are in terms of business today. So we appreciate and seriously thank the Nigerian who saw it, who gave us the impetus. But I think the government also needs to come in very strongly and see what the Nigerian has done to create a playing field that can sustain this by creating laws and policies that encourage social. Today, you don't go to school to be employed. There's no employment. I encourage the young, finish up school, because I hold a lot of talks in schools, in universities. We collaborate with schools like Rusinga. We collaborate with schools and the universities like the Wangari Maathai Institute of University of Nairobi, Mount Kenya University, the Innovation Center, the NYS Center. We collaborate, we share and talk about our journey. That journey sends an insight to the young aspirants who want to be social entrepreneurs. It opens their eyes and they can see that really you don't go to school to be employed. You go to school to create employment.
But Daktari, can everybody be an entrepreneur? For sure.
Sorry?
Can everybody be an entrepreneur?
Not everybody, but I think the circumstances will drive us to become entrepreneurs. You don't graduate out of medical school and you find a job waiting for you like it used to. We have doctors stomaching. So if he's not absorbed within the medical fraternity, he should use that skill to do something else. But the fact that he's seen somebody do this, like you and me, then it will inspire them to start thinking in a different way. Start harnessing their small thoughts from just being dreams to being realities. We've done it.